Hi, Sandi Maki with a little bit of heavy breathing just before midnight. I had a mastermind group meeting tonight, and we were talking about the significance of one step at a time or one day at a time. And this really puts things into perspective, considering the fact that I'm on episode number 68 of Heavy Breathing just before midnight, and it seems like just yesterday that I was on episode number 1, and really had no idea how it was going to go or how I was going to do it every day. It's that every day you just make one incremental step, or record one podcast, or do one blog post. And pretty soon you look back at it, and because we have the sense that time is linear, there's so many all of a sudden that are compiled. And the same goes for anything in life that we're setting out to do. And this is where I think we have a challenge with goal setting sometimes. Because everybody in goal setting tries to say, well, see the top of the mountain, and then turn and look backwards and see what that last step was and that last step. Well, I think sometimes it is so hard for people to fathom. How am I ever going to have 100 blog posts under my belt, or 100 podcasts? Or how am I going to get 50 catalogs of photos indexed on Google? Or how am I going to just make $1, let alone $1 million? I read a book recently. It's called Finding the Pearl by Tammy Fadler. And there is a woman who sets the life-living example of one day at a time and one step at a time. She came over from Vietnam when she was 20-something with $10 to her name. And she landed at an airport that was nowhere near where she was going. And she didn't really have a concept of how big the United States were, and that there were airports in every state, let alone, more than one or two just in the country. And from her perspective, when she got here, she really didn't have any limitation or set of limitations on herself. There was nothing that she couldn't accomplish. And in her lifetime, she has been a proponent of education. She ran a restaurant for a while, and it kind of burned to the ground, and she started over, and she became a multi-million-dollar producer in real estate. And she ended up sponsoring 25 or 26 of her family members over from Vietnam. And she's someone who, I don't know if she knew what came at the top of the mountain, but every day she just did a little bit more. And now she can look at her life, and she's got her memoir out, which is one of the best books that I've ever read. And it just makes us, look little in comparison with our perceived limitations or the things that we think we can do and achieve and accomplish in our life. It really starts to put that in perspective. So I don't know what your top of the mountain looks like, and I don't know if you've been to any goal-setting seminars where you've tried to figure out what that even looks like. All I can tell you is set your compass point to whatever it might be, and every day when you wake up, you've got to do something, whether it's that one blog post, or it's recording one episode of a podcast, or if it's writing one chapter or one sentence or one paragraph in your book. Whatever that looks like, you've just got to take consistent action almost every day. And I say almost every day because if you put it into such a rigid format, I think it's just our human nature sometimes to rebel against that, unless you're the type of person that it works for. I know in Heavy Breathing, I set out to do it because it felt good to me. It was a place for me to explore ideas and concepts. And when I started thinking about putting it into a framework of I'm going to do an episode every single day, and it'll be this amount of time long, well, all of a sudden it wasn't fun for me anymore. So when I gave myself the freedom of recording it when I felt like it, knowing that I would do episodes on a regular basis, and when I didn't set a time parameter, that it didn't have to be this particular length long, then I've been able to work it into exactly what I'm doing. And I'm sure before I blink, I'll be at episode 100, and then 150, and I'll wonder where the time went. But right now, if I try to project myself out to episode 150, it just doesn't make sense. The world might change between now and when that happens. There might be a new format available that I just become a lot more excited about. There's plenty of things that I can be doing and talking about now, and each day when I sit down to record this, it serves me somehow, which is why I still get to keep doing it. That, I think, is another consideration that we need to make when it comes to goal setting. Sometimes when we set what the top of the mountain looks like, things change. And then if we abandon our goals or we change them, there's some guilt maybe associated with changing the rules. Because if you change what your goal is, then you appear wishy-washy, or you seem like you don't really know what you want, or you're indecisive, or maybe you're not very good at goal setting. There's hundreds and hundreds of these tapes that we've just saddled ourselves with that sort of control us in a sense and control our minds. And it seems almost the fluke or the exception rather than the rule when we're able to overcome those and figure out what else to do about it. I don't know. My best advice for you is set your intention and then every day just do a little bit. If you have a goal of writing a book, write a sentence. And some days you'll sit down and you'll try to write a sentence and probably nothing will happen. And other days you'll sit down and it'll just flow. So give yourself the ability to be flexible. And the days when it's flowing, flow with it. Some days I'll go for about a week or a week and a half without doing a heavy breathing podcast. And then in one night I'll have so much inspiration that I'll just decide to record a bunch. And that doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I let it. Because I know when inspiration is flowing, it's not necessarily up to me to set the time parameters of when I think it's acceptable to be having good ideas. You've just got to roll with it and let things happen. And I'm watching someone else do this. The pool guy has recently gotten into podcasting, and he's been watching me since I started doing my podcast series and putting videos up and blog posts, and he's done a bit of it on his own. And I know that he's kicked himself a couple of times for not starting sooner or not having more under his belt. And a funny thing happens when you just take out the camera or you set up the Spreecast or you hit the record button and you do it today and then you do it next time and you do it next time. Pretty soon you have hours and hours of footage and you kind of wonder where it came from. And it's overwhelming to look at just the bulk and the amount that's available. And then you split it up into smaller pieces and you start releasing it one day at a time. And one day after one day after one day, the magic happens. There's a perception, I think, that we have as average people about what it takes for fame or what it takes for popularity or the difference between an everyday athlete and a professional athlete. And it's just doing that little bit extra. What's the difference between the pool guy who's now got 150 short videos out on YouTube and the pool guy who doesn't have any? Well, it was one day after one day after one day. And pretty soon you stand out from the crowd because you're the guy that has all the content. And what's the difference between me, who's got 68 episodes of heavy breathing out, versus the person who just has an idea? Well, for 70 days or 68 days, I've decided to hit record and talk and see what happens. And that's without judgment, without expectation. Some days I enjoy them better than others. But if I can hit the play button after I've recorded something and I'm intrigued enough to listen to the end of it, then you know what? That's good enough for me. So whatever your mountain is, whatever your goal is, whatever your intention is, I hope that you'll just take a little bit of inspiration from myself, maybe from the pool guy, or maybe from someone else that you come across online, and you'll just make a habit of doing something a little bit incrementally each day. Because at some point, because we do believe that time is linear and it marks off the distance between now and later, or here and then, or where we are now to where we were before, that you'll be able to look at your body of work and see just how much you've accomplished and how many people you've inspired. People that I know have the goal of influencing maybe 100 people or 1,000 people or 1,000,000 people in their lifetime through things that they're sharing and things that they're doing. And I never imagined in my wildest imagination that I would have tens of thousands of people that I would have influenced to this point in my life and in my career. And yet when I add it up, day after day, program after program, I know that that number is real. So sometimes it's hard to fathom from the front side looking at where we'd like to be. But from where I'm sitting, it all makes perfect sense. And it all just means taking it one day at a time. So whatever your one day at a time is, I hope you'll start right now if you haven't started already, or start tomorrow. But don't wait too long, because pretty soon, if you start today and do it again tomorrow, you'll be able to look at it and be extremely thankful for the amount of information and yourself that you've been able to put into other people's lives, and maybe inspire or share a story or two along the way and change the world into a little bit of a better place. Until next time.